What's up, guys? It's KB. Make sure you subscribe to the Underground Sports Philadelphia YouTube channel. Click the bell icon down below so you don't miss a single video from us. And thanks for tuning in to another video from Underground Sports Philadelphia. Now let's get into it.
Philadelphia, baby, you're going to love it. Best sports fans in the world. Actually, the worst, but that's what makes them the best.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Eagles Enemies presented by Underground Sports Philadelphia. It's Season 5, Episode 6, and the Birds are coming off a Monday night football victory over the Minnesota Vikings. Kirk Coupons looked like Kirk Coupons in primetime. Darius Slay is ready to bring the hammer, and Jalen Hurts proving the haters wrong. Let's go. We're heading down to Washington, a.k.a. Maryland, this week to take on the Washington Commanders, and there's no better way to break down an Eagles-Commanders matchup than with my good friend Lake Lewis Jr., so stay tuned for my conversation with my buddy Lake. But before we get started, make sure you guys are following us at Underground PHI for the best goddamn Eagles coverage in the game, plus every other Philly sports team, because we show love for everybody. It's the city of brotherly love, for crying out loud. And it's at Underground PHI, Twitter and Instagram. You can follow me on Twitter at KBIZZL311. Subscribe to the podcast feed, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, we are there. And make sure you guys are leaving 5-star ratings and reviews on Apple and Spotify. Let us know how you're feeling about this Birds team so far this season. And the more you subscribe, the more you leave ratings and reviews, it helps more people find the show and gets more people involved with the underground community that we are building here at Underground Sports Philadelphia. And of course, subscribe to the Underground Sports Philadelphia YouTube channel, where we give you full video episodes of every Underground Sports Philadelphia podcast. That includes Eagles Enemies this year. First time full video form for Eagles Enemies in this show's history. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just search Underground Sports Philadelphia on YouTube. Smash that like button, ring the bell icon, and comment down below your thoughts on this matchup between the Birds and the Commanders. And without any further ado, let's chop it up with the one and only Lake Lewis Jr. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are 2-0. The Philadelphia Eagles coming off a very convincing Monday Night Football win on ABC against the Minnesota Vikings. Darius Slay is playing at an all-time level. Jalen Hurts is proving the doubters wrong. And now we're getting set for a road trip a little bit down the way to say hello to an old friend, Carson Wentz, and the Washington Commanders. And there's no better way to talk about the Commanders than with my good friend, Lake Lewis Jr. Welcome back to the show, Lake. And how are we feeling so far, 2 weeks into the Carson Wentz era in Washington, D.C.?
Good to be back with you too, my friend. Carson Wentz is he's played well. He really has. I mean, he's had, he had the two, really poorly thrown interceptions going back to the Jacksonville game. And then he had a pick in this past game against Detroit. But overall, I think he's played exceptionally well. And he's given this offense something that they haven't had. And they haven't had a big, strong quarterback who can push the ball down the field the way he does. So with the young weapons that they have in Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel and Jahan Dotson, I think there's a lot of room for optimism that he can continue to play at this level. We just got to keep him upright, because the offensive line, Detroit was bringing a lot at him last week. And Philadelphia has a great front four. So, you just hope that you can keep them upright. But I think everyone feels good about the offense. It's just the defensive side of the ball is giving a lot of people fits right now.
Let's talk about that matchup because, as everybody says, football is won in the trenches. And this Washington offensive line going up against this Eagles revamped, very deep defensive line, as well as arguably the best linebacker group that I can remember the Eagles having probably since like 2004. It's absolutely wild to think that the Eagles have a solid core of linebackers now. What are you looking for from this Washington offensive line, especially going up against, defensive edge rushers, defensive tackles that kind of know Carson Wentz's tendencies, like a Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave, guys like that who have been around Carson Wentz in his career and kind of know how he operates in and out of the pocket. What are some things you're looking for matchup-wise to see how, this Washington offensive line can kind of stand up against this Eagles front four and of course the front seven as well.
Yeah, I mean they're going to have to do an outstanding job come Sunday. I mean the Eagles defense, is really solid, and then you think of Jordan Davis in the middle now, another young piece that they've added in. I mean, they've got weapons all over their defensive side. I think the one part of the field that you may be able to get into is once you get past the first, two tiers. Once you get into the secondary, of course, they've got, really solid corners and a great corner in Darius Slay. But I think if you were to ask me today, where's the one area where you're still not sold on the Eagles? For me, it's got to be the safeties. So, that's where you might see a guy like a Curtis Samuel in the middle of the field where they're running stuff, post and things like that, where they can bring up those safeties and make them honest. But on the other side is you got to be able to run the football. And that may be difficult because, their true starting running back was a rookie who came in and took everybody by storm, and Brian Robinson Jr. Unfortunately, he had a tragic situation happen where he was carjacked and shot. But he looks to be back on pace to maybe be back after week 4. So, I think that this would have been the perfect game to be able to show what he could do because he's more of he's a big back, he can catch, but he's also a battering ram. And that's what you need against a defense like Philadelphia is a fast flying around defense. You kind of need to wear on them just a tad to slow them down and slow the game down. So to get back to your original question, I just think for Washington to have any success on offense, they've got to try to establish the run. Even if they're not effectively accumulating yards, they're accumulating the amount of plays that they do run the ball to keep everyone honest. And then maybe your wide receivers, the three-headed monster that they have, can cause some damage on the outside.
And, you bring up the running back position, and how have you kind of assessed Antonio Gibson trying to stay afloat, while Brian Robinson Jr. has been out to kind of, at least keep his name in the mix once he returns and, kind of be a 1-2 punch running back dynamic. But how has Antonio Gibson been when it seemed like he was kind of, on the outside looking in until, the unfortunate circumstance with Brian Robinson?
I mean, Antonio's a good football player. I mean, but he's a guy that he's not a natural running back. So, and you could tell, you can see the difference between him and Brian Robinson, even though Brian Robinson hasn't taken a regular season snap. What you saw in training camp, what you saw in preseason with Robinson is his Alabama pedigree. He immediately knows what gap to hit, what hole to hit. You can tell by the way he runs as far as how he switches hands when contact's coming there. Those are just things that are embedded in running backs' minds. And if you're Antonio Gibson and you're a supporter of his, you have to understand that, he was a wide receiver in college. So when he came to Washington, they saw something in him enough that he played some running back in college, but he was more of a Swiss Army knife. And I think that that's how they envisioned using him originally when he was drafted. But his body's grown. He's built himself up a little bit to be more of a durable type back. It's just that that's not his vision isn't there. So, again, this would have been the perfect game to have Brian Robinson Jr. kind of put his name out there to the masses and see what he could do. That'll have to wait, for a couple more weeks until they play again back in Philadelphia. But with that said, Antonio Gibson, he's capable, but he's more of a volume back. In order for him to really get a flow for what he's trying to do out there, he's got to get a lot of touches. And what I do like what they're doing with him is they're kind of taking him back to his roots in college where, he was a wide receiver. So they're spreading him out a little bit. So, even if he's back behind center or back behind Carson Wentz, he still goes out to the flats. And that's what you want. You got to get the ball in his hand because he is a mismatch for a lot of linebackers out there. So that could be an intriguing matchup, the fast athletic linebackers for the Eagles and seeing if they can take Antonio Gibson's game away from him coming out the backfield for receiving.
And, you brought up the secondary with the corners that the Eagles have now. And again, just like the linebacker core that this team has, I can't remember the last time the Eagles have had two formidable Pro Bowl caliber cornerbacks. Now James Bradbury opposite of Darius Slay, and then the Eagles also bring in C.J. Gardner-Johnson to kind of convert him to safety to play alongside Marcus Epps. How do you kind of view, the way that Carson Wentz, as I remember him and have seen him play, and now that you've gotten a chance to watch him as well, he is a gunslinger type of quarterback. He likes to push the ball down the field. knowing that the Eagles have these kind of guys who can go out there and kind of play that ball hawk center field type of corner defensive back position, not to mention Avonte Maddox as well in the slot. How do you kind of perceive that matchup going if Carson Wentz is trying to push the ball down the field to a Curtis Samuel, to a Terry McLaurin going up against Darius Slay, or even Dotson, who's probably going to match up against James Bradbury?
Yeah, you gotta play to win. And if they think that this offense is going to be what they envision it being, and it's kind of close already, you've got to attack Philadelphia. I mean, you can't look across and decide, we can't do certain things because Darius Slay's over here. He's on Terry McLaurin. I mean, Terry McLaurin just got a big bag this offseason, and it's not to stay away from him. It's to go to him, regardless of who's checking him, or who's defending him. So I think if you're Washington, you show your respect to Philadelphia's defense and certain players, but you still got to go at them. You still got to make them earn their paycheck as well. And I've never been in the camp of stay away from a guy because of his accolades and his record. He could have a bad game that game, but you won't know if you're afraid to try him. So I'm trying them early and I'm trying them often, and I'm putting my money, if I'm a Washington Commanders coach, then my guy's going to win the matchup. My guy's going to win the 50-50 ball. And then if you see that they can't, then you adapt and you come up with something else. But I think Washington's offense is really, really good. And I think that they have the potential to be one of the better offensive units at the end of the year, with what they have. And again, with Brian Robinson coming back to add to the arsenal. Their tight end room's been nicked up. Most of them didn't play all throughout the preseason or training camp. So Logan Thomas, suited up first game, played last week, had some catches. But you can see that his rhythm isn't there yet, and it's starting to come back slowly. But you know from your time covering Carson Wentz up there, Carson Wentz loves his tight ends.
That he does.
He hasn't truly gotten them involved to the clip that I thought he was. But that's because they're coming back and they're working themselves back in shape too. So this could be a game that a guy like Logan Thomas could really have kind of like this year's coming out for him, and maybe get 6-7 catches in this game. And that would take a lot of pressure off the receivers as well as Antonio Gibson and Carson Wentz.
And, you brought up the defense for, this Washington team. But before we get to them, we're pretty deep into the Ron Rivera era in Washington. What's your assessment been of, him kind of being the leader of this team at that head coach spot and, what he's been able to do, to kind of keep this team in the limelight, more focused on the team than everything that has been occurring, off the field per se. But what's it been like, now that there's been a few years under the belt of Ron Rivera in Washington?
I mean, he's brought professionalism to the bunch. There's no doubt about that. I mean, they're definitely a more, tightly ran organization. But with that said, I want to see Ron Rivera adapt as well because, the name and everything sounds like he's had nothing but success, but it's actually been the flip side. I mean, he's 3-11, 3-12 as far as 3 winning seasons and 12 years as a coach. That's not getting it done for most coaches. Most coaches, you'd be out of the league or you'd be a coordinator somewhere, a position coach. But for Ron Rivera, it's kept him working. And I think that's because people respect the professionalism and the manner in which he approaches the game. So Washington now, they've got to start, doing something with the X's and O's side of the ball. I mean, there's too much talent, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Jack Del Rio, the defensive coordinator, he's under a lot of heat. A lot of fans want him out. I'm one of the very few media that, I don't want to say very few, but I'm one of the media members that says he's got to step it up. He's got to call better games, and he's got to get his players in position to make plays, the same plays we saw them making in college as All-Americans. They're struggling as pros. So something's got to give. You got to get them in a better opportunity, better situation to play downhill and fast football where they're not thinking like robots. And this is that type of game. Philadelphia's got talent all across the board, great running back room. You have A.J. Brown now who's doing great stuff. Devontae Smith. I mean, Devontae Smith, you have so much going for you offensively, Jalen Hurts. But, with the Eagles, one thing that we can say so far, as great as the offenses look, they haven't put the ball in the end zone as far as passing, one passing touchdown. So you've got to be able to bring some pressure with Jalen Hurts and watch your gaps, because we all know that this guy's one of the best running quarterbacks in the league as well. So you just got to pay your positions, play your spots. Don't overcommit on the edges coming around, because he'll come underneath you. And then you got to take away the big plays, because that's what's killed Washington pretty much since Ron Rivera's come here. Their defense has been gashed with huge plays. And if they can limit that, it gives them the best chance to be able to compete and possibly steal the game on Sunday. I think it's going to be a daunting task to do that, but I still think that that's the blueprint that you have to have. Make Jalen Hurts very uncomfortable, and make him beat you with his arm, because he's proven over and over he will destroy teams with his legs. So you got to make him stay in the pocket and just take your chances.
And luckily, I think, that Monday night game was the best opportunity for Jalen Hurts to kind of showcase that he is an accurate passer, became the first, player in NFL history to, have 300 plus passing yards, an 80 plus completion percentage, and then rush for 2 touchdowns. And the one passing touchdown that you brought up that happened on Monday night was one of those big explosive plays, a 69-yard touchdown to Quez Watkins. How do you kind of view this Washington defense matching up with the versatility that Jalen Hurts presents with his legs, with his arm ability, and then all the weapons that you rattled off, including, Dallas Goedert, Quez Watkins in the fold, and then you have, that running back arsenal. Miles Sanders looks like he's back from, just even below the dead, because scored his first rushing touchdown this year since December of 2020, and then you throw into the mix a Boston Scott, a Kenneth Gainwell. They certainly have the weapons now, and that has kind of been the talk of the town when it comes to Jalen Hurts. Is he doesn't really have the excuses anymore now that all the weapons are around him.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, the Eagles are loaded. Like we said, they've got talent everywhere, and Washington struggles with the big plays, and it seems like the Eagles are making big plays this year, so it's kind of pick your poison. You take the running game away, and, if you take one facet away, there's 2-3 other facets to the Eagles offense. If you take Miles Sanders in the running back room away, are you taking Jalen Hurts' legs away? If you're taking his legs away, now are you taking Smith and Brown and Watkins and Goddard? Are you taking their passing game away? So this is a game where the one thing I need to see Philadelphia be able to do before I'm convinced that they're a Super Bowl team, and I think that they're close. And if they can prove this to me the next phase, then I know they are a Super Bowl contender. And that's how tough are they, because a lot of teams look cute and they're, they can put up the numbers and everything's fast. And, but when a team smacks you in the mouth, how do you respond? And I kind of saw Detroit do that in the second half against Philadelphia. They kind of punched them in the mouth and got right back in that football game. Philly responded quite well, don't get me wrong. But last week, Minnesota's not the same team when they're outside of Minnesota. They're just not. Kirk Cousins, I've covered him for years. He's not the same quarterback on the road. He's just not. So now you go on the road, and in a divisional game against a familiar opponent and a desperate opponent. I mean, even though Washington's 1-1, they beat Jacksonville. It doesn't look like a bad win, because Jacksonville beat Indianapolis last week. But the way they lost to Detroit, they didn't just lose. They kind of got punched in the mouth themselves. So now I need to see them go back and get back to being physical and slowing teams down. They have enough talent on defense to do that, but they haven't been able to put it together in a couple of years, frankly, with all that talent. This is the type of game that you can make a statement that, you're ready to, kind of excel. You're ready to show people that you can be a team that can compete for a playoff spot too. But if you go out here and you get punched in the mouth by Philadelphia again, it's going to start being some grumblings here. That could be a long season.
And, we talked about the offensive line matchup between, Washington and the Eagles defensive line. On the flip side, this Eagles offensive line is regarded as arguably one of, if not the best in the NFL. How do you view that matchup with Washington's defensive line going up against, some future Hall of Famers and Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson and the rest of this Eagles O-line?
Well, this is the thing. Whenever you look at a team and you can see that they can run the football the way the Eagles can at that clip, then that tells you that their offensive line's pretty good. The league is set up now to be a passing offensive league. But when you can man up and knock guys back and run the ball down their throat, that means you're imposing your will physically on the line of scrimmage. And if the Eagles can come out and do that, Washington's strength on defense is their front four. So they're going to need, it's like kind of like a clash of the Titans there. Each offensive line is going to have to try to early and often impose their will. And whichever team succeeds in that's going to win this football game. There's no doubt about it. I think with the Eagles, though, their goal is to keep Jalen Hurts as clean as possible. The difference also is that Jalen Hurts, though, can take off on you and, like we said, beat you with his legs. So I think the Eagles' offensive line doesn't have to be great every week because they have such a dynamic quarterback and there's a lot of weapons. They just have to keep him upright and keep him able to be comfortable to do the things that he wants to do. And if they can do that Sunday early, that'll dictate the tempo and the flow of the game.
A.J. Brown was the big offseason acquisition for the Eagles. He's kind of imposed his will over both of the two teams that the Eagles have played so far this year. How do you view Washington trying to stop A.J. Brown from just being the game wrecker that he is?
Man, that's going to be tough. I mean, do you put William Jackson on him or, at times you might have a Kendall Fuller matched up on him, but he's just so big and strong. It's not too many corners in the NFL that can match up with him, frankly. And I was just surprised that Tennessee just let him get away. I mean, you got to give him the house, just keep him. I look at him and he looks like T.O. That's my friend, good friend of mine. So he looks like T.O. in his uniform, and it's just to see him and to pair him with Smith and Goddard. And now Watkins has emerged. Watkins has made people forget about Jalen Reagor. Like you don't even remember him now. It's just amazing to see how they put this thing, together, Soriano and everyone. It's just amazing to see how they put this thing together overnight. When just 2 years ago, there was quarterback controversy, coaching situation. And you guys were thinking at least you got that Super Bowl in because you're not going to see another one for another 50, 60 years. Well, now you're a contender. I mean, just overnight. So it's just interesting to see how they put all that together. It's amazing, actually.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you just didn't see coming, and you scratched your head when Jalen Hurts was the pick in the second round, and now, you're thanking your lucky stars that Howie Roseman was able to pull that off. Lake, we have incorporated a fun, ending piece of Eagles enemies with our guests, and this one's kind of, hits right at home for Washington. Obviously, the stadium not in the best of states over the past couple of years. If you were to pick a location for a new Washington Commanders stadium, where would you plop that bad boy down to have the Commanders call it home?
Obviously, it would have to be in the city. It would have to be in D.C. It's pretty sad to think that the nation's Capitals team, not America's team, I didn't say that, but the nation's Capitals team, plays in Maryland and resides headquarter-wise. We're all in Virginia, Ashburn, Virginia. They really don't have anything to do with D.C. So that would be the first thing. You would have to find some space there. Unfortunately, the areas where stadiums were popping up, they're all filled now with Nationals Park and Audi Field for soccer. All that's downtown. The Wizards Capitals play downtown. Washington's the only Washington Pro team that's not downtown. And, so the best place for me, I would say the old RFK Stadium. You build around that. Maybe it's RFK too, but you build around that area. But I think, that's the part of D.C. that's come up quite a bit. And, people moving in now, restaurants popping up. They don't want that there. So it's going to be tough for them to find a stadium space in D.C. But for me, that would have to be the place you could have the backdrop of the Capitol and the monument. It would just make for great TV.
Yeah, I mean, I think anywhere right now is more ideal than the setup of FedEx Field, and hopefully, it gets situated sooner rather than later. Lake, it's always a pleasure having you on the show. Let everybody know where they can check out all your work you're doing covering the Commanders.
You can check me out on social media, on Twitter at Lake Lewis, on Instagram, Facebook, which I call the old people social media. It's Lake Lewis Jr. And then, of course, you can go to sportsjourney.com, and our social media for sportsjourney.com is sportsjourney.com. So we try to keep it the same. And then, of course, I'm a morning anchor on ABC News here in West Virginia. And I'm also a contributing insider for ABC back home in D.C. for the team. So you look me up; it'll be up there somewhere, hopefully.
It's going to be one heck of a game on Sunday. Looking forward to it. I'm sure we'll be talking throughout the game. But again, appreciate you hopping on the show and looking forward to this big matchup on Sunday.
All right. Good times, my friend. Good to be back on with you. Hopefully we do it again real soon.
Big thank you to my man, Lake Lewis Jr., for hopping on the show. Sounds like it's going to be a battle through the air, potentially down in D.C., a.k.a. Maryland. But I think the Eagles are going to have themselves one hell of a game. I think the defense is ready to play, continue to step up and progress from that week 1 gashing that they took, and they showed that on Monday Night Football, and I think it's going to continue to trend in that direction. And the offense has looked phenomenal to start this season so far, so I'm looking forward to Jalen Hurts and company going down to FedEx Field and shredding up the Commanders' defense for the world to see. Eagles, Commanders, Sunday. It's going to be a doozy, and we got you covered at Underground PHI, Twitter and Instagram. Follow me on Twitter at KBIZZL311. Check out our website, undergroundsportsphiladelphia.com. Subscribe to the podcast feed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We are there. And, of course, leave those 5-star ratings and reviews because it helps more people find the show. It's where you get full audio of Eagles enemies every single week during the Eagles season. And you also get Underground Sports Philadelphia twice a week on that feed, plus the Dan Russo Show during high school football season with Vineland High School football. And it helps more people join the Underground community when you subscribe to the podcast feed and you leave 5-star ratings and reviews. Let me know how you're feeling about this game coming up on Sunday. And, of course, subscribe to the Underground Sports Philadelphia YouTube channel. You get full video episodes of Eagles enemies and every Underground Sports Philadelphia podcast that we have to offer under our network's umbrella. Smash that like button, ring the bell icon, comment down below your thoughts on this matchup, and let's enjoy another Sunday of Eagles football. And hopefully next week when we're talking Eagles-Jags, we're talking about a 3-0 Eagles team on the road to victory. But this has been another episode of Eagles Enemies presented by Underground Sports Philadelphia. I'm your host, Kyle Bennett. And until next week, you already know the deal. It's always Go Birds.